Alright, today we're going to talk about is the quadratic formula. So before we get into that, let's practice simplifying some radical expressions. So this is just basically your order of operations. So this is our grouping of sorts, and within that we're going to do the radical first. Now remember, it's negative 5 times negative 5, which gives you a positive 25. And then you're going negative 5 times 2 times 3, which gives you negative 30. And then it's all over 4, and then bring this over. So now that you got this, you're going to, within the grouping under the radical, go 25 minus 30, which gives you negative 5, and then bring the rest with it. So I've got negative 9 plus or minus the square root of negative 5 all over 4. Remember, we know that if we see a negative under a square root, we can actually factor that out as I. So then we've got negative 9 plus or minus I root 5 over 4. So this is how we would simplify that. Alright, so go ahead, I want you to try that one. And then, I'll give you a hint, you will get a fraction with this one, so if you do get negative 9/4, you are correct. So just watch that one. Okay, now we're going to talk about the quadratic equation. So the quadratic equation is you're going to take this information that it gives you where it's equal to 0, and you're looking at A, B, and C. So the quadratic equation is you take x is equal to negative whatever b is, make it negative b, and then you're going to go plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. So remember, a and c is your constant, and all this is under the radical. Then it's all over 2 times a. So it's just substituting in the information and then simplifying or solving. So let's go through and let's look here. And when you're looking at this, just make sure you know which one is what. So I know that my a is my 3. A is 3, and I know my b is 5, and my c is negative 6. And the reason why it's negative 6 is because we had to subtract 6 to get it equal to 0. So make sure you list out your numbers so when you are doing your formula, you can go ahead and put everything in the correct spot. So I'm going to have x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4a times c, and it's all over 2a. So that's all we're doing, is just plugging this all in, and then now we're going to go ahead and simplify. That gives you positive 72, 2 over 3 gives you 6, and then remember this is negative 5 right here. Alright, so now that we got that, go ahead and combine those two together to get 97, and then you're just going to bring the rest down. Alright, and in this case, we can't factor square root of 97 anymore, so we can just leave that, and then this is actually the solution. So when you're solving quadratic formulas, you could always use the quadratic formula or to solve instead of factoring and doing everything else. It's always going to work. However, sometimes people can make simple mistakes in here, and so usually people save the quadratic formula, which is x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So they use this if it can't be factored any other way. Alright, I want you to go ahead and try that one. Now here's your hint. Remember, you have to add 6x and 9 to set it equal to 0. And then once you got that, I want to see what a, b, and c are. List those off to the side, and then go ahead and do your formula. Alright, so go ahead, finish this one. Let's look at number 3. Now number 3, again, what we're going to do is we're going to move this all over to the same side, and then set it all equal to 0. So now that I've got this, a is 6, B is 3, and C is 4. So it's just plugging it into the correct spot. So you've got x is equal to negative b, and I usually use parentheses whenever I'm substituting things in, just so we don't accidentally make a mistake, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And then again, order of operations to simplify, and then that we brought down here. So now let's go ahead and I get negative 87, bring the rest down, so I get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 87. Well, notice I've got a negative under here, so I know I got to factor out an I because that's an imaginary number. I can't factor 87 down anymore, so I'm going to leave that as is. And then I'm going to bring everything else down. So you could write it this way, or if you were to break it apart and you've got negative 1/4. So either one of these answers would be acceptable. All right, I want you to go ahead and try that one. And then this one is same thing, but when I'm looking at this, there is no B. So I've got A, which is 2, but B, there's no B value there. So since there's no B, you need to put 0, but C is 8. So we're still going to plug in all this information into the formula. So we got x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so 0 plus or minus 0 minus 64 over 4. So this is going to combine to give you negative square root of 64. Well, since you have a negative under the radical, that's going to make 8. And then the square root of 64 is 8. Don't forget your plus or minus sign. And remember, since it was 0, that went away. And then just go ahead and it's plus or minus 2i. Or you could write it as positive 2i, negative 2i. So either one of those options are correct. So go ahead and try that one. Now we're going to talk about the discriminant. The discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So if you looked back on your formula, it's what's under the radical. So this part under there is your discriminant. Is what's underneath here. So when you're looking, that's the underneath part of the radical. All right, so now let's go back here. Now we use the b squared minus 4ac to determine the number and nature of the solution. So how many solutions are you going to have? What kind of solutions are they going to be? So if your discriminant is 0, you're going to have one real rational solution. If your discriminant is negative, you'll have 2 imaginary solutions, so they're also called complex roots, or complex roots on there. If you have a positive perfect square, you're going to have 2 rational roots, which makes sense. And if you have a positive but not a perfect square, it'll be 2 real irrational roots. So not a perfect square. Perfect square, they'll be rational. All right, so let's go ahead and let's figure this out. So now, let's look here. We're going to do A equals 1, B equals negative 10, C equals negative 50. All right, so let's plug it into b squared minus 4ac. So we said b is negative 10 squared minus 4. A we said was 1. And then C we said was 50. Do this first to get positive 100, then multiply those out to get positive 200. So when we add this together, our discriminant is going to be 300. Well, this is a positive, And we said that but it's not a perfect square. So positive, not perfect. So the type of solution you're going to have is going to go two real irrational roots. Which makes sense, because if you were to take the square root of 30 or 300, it would be irrational. All right, I started this one for you. So remember, you want to set it equal to 0. So we had to subtract 4x to move it over here. And then now that it's equal to 0, now you can do your discriminant, which is b squared minus 4ac. All right, so go ahead and finish this one. And now let's look at number 3. All right, for number 3, we've got everything's already equal to 0. So we're good there. And now we're going to go a equals 4, b equals -4, c equals 17. So when we substitute that in, we get b squared minus 4ac. So do this, you get positive 16, multiply this out, you get negative 272. Well, right away, since my discriminant is a negative number, I know I'm going to have two imaginary solutions. So for this one, I'm just going to write 2 imaginary. So we can use the discriminants to figure out what type of solution we are going to have. So go ahead and finish this one. And then that is using the quadratic formula, which is x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.